I wasn't supposed to be home yet. But I was. And I heard her say it. It was supposed to be a quick detour, she'd forgotten her charger. And I just wrapped up a client call earlier than expected. I didn't even take off my shoes when I came in. Just grabbed the charger from the car and let myself in through the side door. The house was unusually still. A strange kind of still, like the air was holding its breath. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I didn't even know she was home. But then I heard her voice, floating faintly from the upstairs office. "No, Haley," Claire said, her voice low but clear. "I can't fake it anymore. I don't love him." I froze on the stairs, one hand on the banister, the other gripping the charger like a lifeline. The air rushed out of me all at once. And something inside, something basic, some small belief in the world, buckled. A moment of silence followed. Then a soft, breathy laugh, the kind she used to let slip after a satisfying joke. But this wasn't amusement. It sounded like release. Relief. Haley mumbled something I couldn't catch. And Claire responded with something even softer. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I backed down the steps like a ghost retracing its own footsteps. My movements felt automatic, distant, like my body no longer needed me inside it. I placed the charger gently on the entryway table, as if it were made of glass. I didn't leave a note. The front door shut behind me without a click. The world outside was warm and golden, but I felt like I was walking in winter. I didn't even remember starting the car. Just the blur of the driveway disappearing in my rearview mirror, and the quiet hum of the engine beneath my hands. Claire's laptop had always been off limits. She guarded it like a diary with teeth. I'd noticed, of course, the way she tilted the screen when I walked by. The quick clicks to minimize windows. But I never asked. I trusted her. That trust was now lying somewhere on the stairway carpet, between the third and fourth step, bleeding out slowly. That night, she texted me. Just 2 words. "Thanks, babe." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. What could I say? That I heard her? That her words still rang in my ears like gunshots? That, "I don't love him," was louder than any scream she could have given? I lay in bed in the guest room of a friend's apartment, a temporary setup while my new place was still being painted. The ceiling fan ticked above me, mechanical and indifferent. I stared into the darkness and tried to piece together the hours. The years. Had she been pretending that long? Was there a point when it was real? My chest ached, but I wasn't sure from what: heartbreak, humiliation, or just sheer disbelief. I kept hearing her voice on repeat. Not the words, just the tone, the calm in it, like she was finally unburdened by a lie she'd held too long. That night, I didn't sleep. That sentence just kept echoing. Not love, not anymore. I played husband for 6 more days. And then I quit the role. Each morning, I made the coffee the way she liked, dark roast. Splash of oat milk, cinnamon dusted on top. I still folded her laundry. Matched her socks. We even watched 2 episodes of a show we both pretended to enjoy. I said, "Good night," and she replied. Sometimes with a smile, sometimes not at all. We shared the same bed but not the same space. The air between us felt hollow, like the set of a stage after the actors go home. The wedding photo on the hallway shelf stared back at me every time I passed. We looked impossibly young, Claire in her lace gown, laughing into my shoulder, me beaming like I'd caught the sun. It had gathered a thin coat of dust, not from neglect, but from carelessness. No one had touched it in months, maybe years. I kept waiting for a sign, a flicker of regret in her eyes, a question, a plea, something to suggest that what I'd heard on the stairs wasn't final. But it never came. She moved through our days like someone who had already left. Only her body hadn't caught up yet. On the 6th morning, I poured 2 mugs of coffee and set hers on the counter. She didn't look up from her phone. Her hair was still damp from the shower. Her robe cinched perfectly. She looked peaceful, detached. "I think we should end it," I said, voice even. I didn't plan the moment. It just arrived. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't say no. She just said, "Okay." That was it. No fight. No dramatic tearful protest. No denial. She didn't ask what change. Maybe because she already knew. We finished our coffee in silence. 10 minutes later, I began folding my clothes into a duffel bag. She walked past the room twice and never glanced in. I pulled down the suitcase from the hall closet, the same one we took to Maui for our honeymoon, and filled it with as much as I could fit. No keepsakes. No pictures. Just shirts, socks, shoes, toothbrush. In the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, scrolling. When I zipped up the bag, she looked up and said, "Do you want me to call you a ride?" I shook my head. "Okay," she said again. And that was the last word we exchanged. She didn't even ask why. I think that hurt more than anything. I left with a suitcase and a toothbrush. That's all she let me keep. You don't notice silence until it becomes your only companion. Portland winters have a way of seeping into your bones, not just from the rain, but from the weight of gray skies and empty hours. My one-bedroom apartment felt colder than outside. Not in temperature, but in texture. The kind of cold that came from absence. Each day blurred into the next. Wake, shower, coffee, work, pretend, sleep, or try to. I'd taken a job at a logistics firm downtown. Numbers didn't ask questions. My boss barely spoke to me beyond quarterly reports. The barista downstairs memorized my name but not my face. My neighbor nodded once when our trash bins collided. That was the extent of my human contact. I kept Claire's wedding ring tucked inside an old drawer, buried beneath tax documents and expired warranties. Once a month, maybe twice, I'd open it, not to wear it, but to remind myself it wasn't a dream. That it happened. That we happened. The letter she left me, 4 lines scribbled on hotel stationery, stayed tucked in my desk until January. I burned it over the kitchen sink after too many nights rereading the same empty sentences. But I couldn't bring myself to throw away the photo. Maui, sunset, her chin on my shoulder, my arm around her waist like I thought I'd never let go. Sleep had become fragmented. I'd doze for 30 minutes. Then wake up sweating. Some nights I'd remember the smell of her shampoo and nearly lose my breath. Other nights I'd dream of conversations that never happened, her explaining, apologizing, unraveling the silence. I always woke up before the end. That Thursday, I left work late and ducked into a Thai place near my building. The line was short, the lights humming overhead. I ordered pad see-ew and stood to the side, scrolling through nothing on my phone. And then I saw her. Claire. Same posture, same hair, only shorter. Her coat was open, revealing a soft blue sweater. She looked up and froze. Just a second too long. In her arms, a child, maybe 2, maybe 3, curly dark hair, pink sneakers dangling. Our eyes locked. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. But it was me who couldn't breathe. She asked to talk in the car. I said yes, without knowing it was a one-way road. We met in the parking lot of a grocery store off Division Street. The sun had dipped low, casting a copper hue over the cracked pavement. Claire was already parked, engine idling, radio faint in the background. Ivy was strapped into the car seat, humming tunelessly to herself, her small legs kicking rhythmically. Claire's wave was quick, almost nervous. I slid into the passenger seat without speaking. The inside of the car smelled like apple slices and lavender wipes. The scent of a life I'd never seen. Never been invited into. Ivy turned to look at me. Curious. She had Claire's cheekbones, but her hair, dark and coiled into soft, wild curls. It snagged something inside me. My mother used to call mine storm hair when I was little. Claire noticed my stare, reached back, and gently tucked a curl behind Ivy's ear. She didn't smile. I don't usually do this, Claire said, shifting in her seat. Her hands gripped the steering wheel even though we weren't moving. Talk to people from before, as if our marriage had been a life she closed like a door. I saw your face the other night, she continued, and I knew I owed you something. I waited, let the silence do the asking. She doesn't have a dad, Claire said abruptly, eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror. Then to me, legally, I mean, on paper, there's no name. My heart thudded once, loud enough to feel behind my eyes. I was angry, she added, voice tight. I felt stuck, bored, and you were just there. Kind, predictable. I wanted to feel something else. So I pushed you out. That's the truth. It landed like a slap I didn't flinch from. I stared at the dashboard. A toy giraffe bobbled on the console. You were never boring, I said finally. My voice felt small in the cavern of her car. You just got good at acting. Claire winced. Ivy babbled a few sounds, one of which sounded vaguely like, Daddy. My throat tightened, but I didn't react. Claire turned the volume up on the radio slightly, as if trying to drown out something neither of us said. Then she looked at me, really looked, and said, If anything surfaces, promise you'll remember what I said today. What do you mean? She didn't answer, just turned off the engine. I got out, unsure whether I'd imagined the warning in her voice or if it was just my need for answers trying to fill in the blanks. I watched them drive off, Ivy waving a sticky hand through the window. Claire didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. 3 years ago, I walked away. Now I was walking into the truth. It started with a name on a document, one that shouldn't have been there. I had logged in out of boredom. Or maybe obsession. It was past midnight. The glow of my laptop was the only light in the room. The coffee had gone cold beside me. Untouched. I was going through some old insurance records I downloaded during the divorce. Stuff I told myself I'd delete and never did. Claire always handled the medical bills. She said it stressed me out, and it did. I trusted her. Of course I did. But now there it was. Right in the column of dependent care addendum. A line dated 6 months after I left. OB/GYN consultation. Maternity minus $1.140. Billed to the joint plan we had barely dissolved. Her name. My policy. I sat back. My mouth went dry. I called Lucas. He was half asleep, judging by the gravel in his voice. But I didn't care. Lucas and I had known each other since undergrad. And even through our diverging paths, me into data systems, him into law, we'd kept the occasional drink alive. More importantly, he never asked more than once if something mattered. Lucas, I need to know something. If someone billed maternity services under my insurance after we separated, you want a paternity calendar. He said, already waking up. Give me the date of service. I'll reverse map the due date. I emailed him the screenshot. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Conception would have been mid-July 2019. You were still living with her, right? I nodded slowly, though he couldn't see me. Yeah, Lucas exhaled. Then if she had a kid, it's within possibility. I sat still. That word, possibility. I hesitated a moment, then did something I never thought I would. I dialed Haley. It rang 5 times before she answered. Her voice a mix of sleep and wariness. Nathan? I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. A pause. Then a soft, resigned, okay. Was Claire pregnant when we divorced? Another pause. Longer. I could hear her breath catch. She didn't tell you? Haley's voice cracked slightly. Yes, Nathan. She was pregnant. The words slid down the line like poison. She wasn't just hiding truth. She was hiding a child. My heart pounded, but not from anger. Not anymore. Something shifted, something colder, sharper. And suddenly, I wasn't angry. I was done playing the fool. She didn't write it for me. But I think part of her wanted me to read it someday. Haley's house smelled like chamomile and dust. The kind of stillness that only exists where things aren't spoken out loud. We sat at her kitchen table. Neither of us touching the mugs of tea cooling between us. She had called earlier. Her voice low, nervous. Said she found something Claire left behind. The journal was in a Ziploc bag. Black leather cover. A gold clasp long since broken. Haley placed it on the table like it might bite. She left it here after everything. She said. She never asked for it back. I didn't open it until last year. I didn't know what to do with it. I nodded once and reached for it. I shouldn't give this to you. Haley whispered. But you deserve to know. The first page was dated June 2019. 3 weeks before I overheard Claire's confession. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, rushed, familiar. I think I'm pregnant. I don't know whose it is. I froze. Read it again. The ink was smudged slightly. Like maybe she'd cried while writing. The entries that followed weren't daily. Some were half pages. Some were full rants. All raw, unfiltered. Nathan's so kind it makes me nauseous. I feel like I'm acting all the time. Haley says I'm spiraling. I think she's right. There's someone else. I thought it would feel thrilling. It doesn't. It just makes me tired. I turned the page, each word more difficult than the last. There were names scratched out. Regrets. Rambling thoughts about disappearing. About wishing someone else would end it first so she didn't have to be the villain. Then, a week before I left, I lied to him without blinking. I didn't expect it to feel so easy. And finally, one line near the back of the journal. Scrawled without punctuation. Squeezed between receipts and an old grocery list. If it's Nathan's, maybe I won't feel so terrible for ruining him. I closed the journal, hands trembling. Haley looked down, ashamed. She wasn't evil, she said quietly. She was lost. I nodded. Maybe she was both. I thanked her, though I didn't know why. I left the journal in my bag and drove home in silence. Claire's words replaying in my mind like echoes down a hallway I couldn't close. I couldn't sleep that night, but I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. The hat had been under the passenger seat for weeks. Small, blue, with tiny embroidered clouds, ivies. She'd dropped it during that short, stilted ride with Claire, and neither of them had noticed. I hadn't touched it since, as if it might burn. But now I held it in my lap, inspecting the inner seam. It was there, a single strand of hair, dark and curled like mine had been when I was a boy. I eased it out with tweezers, careful not to snap it, and placed it into the sterile vial I'd ordered online the day before. My breath was slow, steady. My chest wasn't. The test kit instructions were simple. Include a control sample, my own cheek swab, and send both overnight. I sealed the envelope, labeled it, and left it by the door. First light would take it away. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not Haley, not even Lucas, though I knew he'd find out soon enough. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the vial. Ivy's hair inside looked fragile, suspended in plastic like something sacred. I remembered a line Claire had once thrown at me during an old argument. Long before the unraveling. Don't be the kind of man who needs proof to love. I hadn't known what she meant then. I did now. She'd been warning me even then, not just about herself, but about the way truth sometimes came disguised as cruelty. The next morning, I walked the kid to the mailbox. It was early. Gray mist hung in the air, and the metal felt cold in my hand. I slid it in and listened for the soft metallic clink, then stood there for another full minute, as if waiting for it to vanish in front of me. 3 days later, Lucas called. "You home?" he asked. "Yeah, check your inbox. It's in." I hung up without a word and opened my laptop. The email was from the lab. Subject line in all caps. Test results, paternity report, confidential. I clicked, scrolled. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. My hands didn't shake, but my heart did. I didn't come to punish her. I came to remind her what she erased. Claire's porch light flickered as I approached, a trembling bulb in a socket long ignored. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the sharp dusk air, the quiet of a cul-de-sac that had no idea what truth was about to arrive at its doorstep. Ivy was with Haley tonight. That was the deal. She opened the door wearing the same cardigan she'd worn during our last real conversation. Her eyes tightened when she saw the envelope in my hand. We didn't speak at first. I walked in. The house was clean, but hollow. The espresso machine still sat on the counter, the one she insisted on keeping during the divorce. I remembered she'd used it exactly twice. Claire crossed her arms, like armor. "You want coffee?" "No." I laid the envelope on the kitchen table. She didn't touch it. "What is this?" she asked. But her voice faltered. "You know what it is," I said. A full 5 seconds passed before she picked it up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tore it open. I watched her face move through the stages: denial, fear, resignation, like waves crashing against a wall too long neglected. "You didn't just lie," I said, quietly. "You rewrote my story without me." Claire swallowed, sat down. Her eyes were glossy but dry. "I thought if you knew," she whispered, "you'd hate her too." The silence that followed was heavy. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded, staring at the espresso machine. It had never matched her. It was too loud, too honest. "You should have let me choose," I said. Claire nodded, slow and small. Then her shoulders shook, not sobbing, just unraveling. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not cruel, not composed, just a woman in pieces. "She's upstairs," Claire said, "sleeping. Do you want to meet her?" My chest tightened. The envelope sat between us like a wound. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive, but I knew I was ready to be her father. She looked at me like she knew me, or like she was waiting to. Claire led me up the stairs in silence, her hand resting lightly on the railing like it might steady something inside her. At the top, she paused outside a half-open door. A warm glow spilled into the hallway, soft, golden, the kind of light that softened everything. "She sleeps lightly," Claire whispered, "but, if she wakes, just be gentle." I nodded. The room was smaller than I expected. filled with soft things, books stacked haphazardly. A mountain of plush animals piled in the corner. Ivy lay curled in a nest of pink blankets. Her rabbit toy tucked under one arm. I recognized it immediately. Same floppy ears. Same stitched smile. Years ago, I'd given Claire the exact same kind for her birthday. She'd laughed then. Said she'd keep it, just in case. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped in slowly, and Claire lingered by the door. Ivy stirred at the sound. Her eyes fluttering open. She blinked up at me. Unafraid. "Hi," I said softly, crouching near the edge of her bed. She sat up, sleep-tousled and rosy-cheeked, and studied me with the quiet intensity of children who feel things more than they understand them. Then, without a word, she held out her bunny. I took it, reverently, as if it were the most sacred offering in the world. "Want some cereal?" I asked. She nodded. Downstairs, Claire poured a bowl and left it on the kitchen counter before retreating back up the stairs. We sat at Ivy's tiny plastic table in the corner of the living room. Legs folded awkwardly, she munched without ceremony, chattering between bites about her friend Mia, about a playground slide, about how her bunny had a real name but it's a secret. And then she said it. "Dad, can you open this?" She pushed the milk carton toward me. It was so casual, so unthinking, that for a moment I wasn't sure I heard her right. But she looked at me again, not in correction, but in confirmation, like she knew. That one word split my life in half, before and after. I poured the milk, nodding, unable to speak. We finished breakfast in silence. Ivy giggling over her spoon as she pretended her cereal were tiny boats. As I stood to rinse her bowl, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen. "Lucas, I've drafted your petition. It's time to make this official. I lost a wife. I found a daughter. And somehow, that feels like a victory." The courtroom had smelled like paper and polish. No drama, no gavel bangs, just quiet arguments in folders and nods from lawyers. Claire had been there, sitting 2 rows ahead, her back rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. We barely made eye contact. And when we did, it wasn't anger we exchanged. It was something like acknowledgement. A silent truce. The judge granted joint custody. But Ivy would spend every weekend with me. Alternating holidays. And extended summers once she was older. It was more than I thought I'd get. Less than I wanted, but fair. Now, Ivy was running barefoot across the carpet of my new apartment, chasing the beam of light from a crystal I'd hung in her window. Her room, the one she named Sky Room, had clouds I painted myself. Not perfect, but real. There were stickers of stars, her name in glitter letters above the bed, and a stack of books we picked out together at the library. She had a toothbrush here, a favorite spoon, a corner of the closet for her rain boots and tutus. She belonged. One afternoon, Claire came by with Ivy's jacket. She didn't come in, just handed it over and lingered for a moment. "She talks about you nonstop," she said, "and the clouds. She tells everyone you made her a room where the sky lives." I smiled. She made it real. Claire nodded, eyes wet, then handed me an envelope. I didn't know how else to say it. That night, after Ivy was asleep with her bunny curled against her side, I opened the letter. "Thank you for being the parent she needed, even when I wasn't. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But she deserves all of you." There was no return address. No signature. Just the weight of honesty. Finally, the next Saturday, we went to the park. Ivy ran ahead of me, fearless in her pink sneakers. When she saw me waiting at the slide, she squealed and ran straight into my arms. "Daddy." No fear, no hesitation, just joy. We sat on the grass after, her hand in mine, sticky with juice and wonder. Above us, the clouds drifted slowly, not unlike the ones on her ceiling. For the first time in a long while, everything felt like it belonged. We're going to be okay. Not perfect, but real. He lost a marriage built on illusion but gained something far more enduring, the undeniable truth of fatherhood. What was once stolen through silence was reclaimed through unwavering resolve, piece by piece, until justice stood clear. When injustice is met with courage, the final verdict doesn't just echo, it restores what was nearly erased. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.